Hi everybody, welcome back to our channel. I'm Miss Hamilton, and today we're going to be looking at a new topic today. So our topic is understanding the Supreme Court in Jamaica. And throughout this video, we're going to be focusing just on what the Supreme Court is, a small background on the Supreme Court. We're going to be focusing on the hierarchical system of the Supreme Court and just how the judicial system in the country is done. And finally, we're going to also be focusing on any issues that arise during these within the Supreme Court or about the Supreme Court and how that affects the society, both economically and socially. So let's get right into it.
Now, what is the Supreme Court? Now, the Supreme Court is the highest court in Jamaica, and it's typically responsible for interpreting laws and ensuring justice is served. The Supreme Court hears cases involving constitutional issues, civil disputes, and criminal appeals. And we have an example here. It says, for instance, someone feels that their rights has been violated, they can reach out to the Supreme Court with their case. Another example is recently with our Vibes Cartel case, what a lot of our students may be aware of, is that for his appeal, which is to have his case or sentence be reduced, he had to reach out to the Supreme Court so that they can hear his case and see if they can make any final changes there for him in that instance. So let's look at a brief background on the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was established in 1880, and around that time they had a numerous amount of courts that were consolidated or grouped together as one court, which was the Supreme Court. And the courts that were grouped together were the Supreme Court of Judicature, we have the High Court of Chancery, the Encumbered Estate Court, the Court of Ordinary, the Court for Divorce and Matrimonial Causes, the Chief Court for Bankruptcy, and the Circuit Courts. And most of these courts may be familiar to some of you, which is okay. You can also check further on the ministry websites where you can get more updates and more information on the courts that are here. Later down in 1962, which was where we gained our independence of Jamaica, it's where the Supreme Court was then recognized by Section 13 of the Jamaican Ordering Council and was adopted as the new court, the new Supreme Court for a newly independent Jamaica. So in 1962, when we gained our independence, that's where the new court was established or recognized as our Supreme Court. Now we're going to be focusing or just taking a brief look at the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. And that's just referring to where or how far does the court's rule reaches, how far do they preside over. So the jurisdiction of the court is both geographical and legal. On a geographical standpoint, the court does preside over all the territories in Jamaica. So any matter that arises within any area, any parish or city in Jamaica, the Supreme Court does have jurisdiction to hear or deal with that case. And there are a few jurisdictions out there. There are a few locations rather of the Supreme Court in Jamaica. We do have the main one in Kingston. We have one in Mandeville, Port Maria, and also in Montego Bay. Regarding the legal jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, now the legal case or the legal jurisdiction is the court's authority to hear and decide cases involving specific areas of the law or types of dispute. So it does take part in any form of legal activities. But the legal jurisdiction can be both original and appellate. And being that it is the Supreme Court, it does has its areas. The or for the original jurisdiction, the Supreme Court does take part in civil matters involving claims that exceed $20 million, and these can be either constitutional matters, which includes your rights and freedom. It also can be admiralty matters or probate and administrative estate matters. In regards to the appellate jurisdiction, it's where appeals from the registrant magistrate court does come forth, and these are appeals from either the parish court, and the appeals from family court or traffic court. And it's where they review or overturn or modify discussions made by the lower courts or tribunals. So that does take part in it. So we're going to be focusing on the structure of Jamaica's judiciary system, and we're going to be zoning in on the Supreme Court, as you can see here from the slide where the arrows are focusing on. Now, the Supreme Court, as most persons are aware, is the highest court, and it deals with it has jurisdiction in civil, criminal, family, commercial, succession, and even admiralty cases. So any civil, criminal, or family cases that we are aware of, the Supreme Court does take part in some of these cases. And if you look at the slide, there are also some other jurisdictions or other courts that the Supreme Court does have jurisdiction over or does preside over. And these courts that you see here, we have the high and the circuit courts, we have the gun court, we even have also the revenue court. So these courts do are presided over or overseen by the Supreme Court. And below that, you do see where the Supreme Court is also connected to the Magistrates Court. And that's like the parish courts where you are seen or you're around, or you see around your areas or your community. So the parish court judges do preside over the night court, drug court, coroner's court, traffic court, and you can see juvenile court and small claims court. So they do have jurisdiction or they do watch over or guard over those areas, those courts, and all those do directly pass most of their major appeals to the Supreme Court. Now, the structure of the Supreme Court and the hierarchy of the Supreme Court are almost the same. Here we have our Chief Justice, which we offer court today. And the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court does lead the court and handles the court's operation. And our Chief of Justice is the Honorable Brian Sykes. For our senior puny judge, or senior puny judge today is Miss Lorna Shelley Williams, and her duty is to assist the chief in administrations of the Supreme Court, and sometimes she may be assigned to preside over certain important cases and appeals. We also have the 20 junior puny judges, and they are responsible for hearing serious civil and criminal cases. And finally, the master or chamber judges, and they are junior to judges with part judicial and admin duties. So they do take part in the cases and do take part in administrative duties in the office. And they primarily handle civil cases within the chambers. Now we're going to be zooming in on the roles of the Supreme Court, and we're just going to ask ourselves, like, what does the Supreme Court do? What's their responsibility? How do they assist us? Now, the Supreme Court is responsible for interpreting laws, protecting our human rights, and they also do judicial reviews. So when it comes into interpreting laws, the Supreme Court interprets the Constitution and other laws, ensuring that they are applied in a fair and consistent manner. So they ensure that the laws that we are used to nowadays are the laws that we are aware of, associates with every individual throughout the country. When we look at protecting human rights, so another role is protecting human rights, and the Supreme Court protects the fundamental rights and freedom of individuals as guaranteed by our Constitution. So they ensure that our rights are being met, and if we do have any issues with or feel that those simple rights are not being given to us in a fair manner, they are responsible for ensuring that they kind of sort that out so that we are able to live freely as simple human beings without any form of hindrance to just how we interact or be in society today. Another role of the Supreme Court is or judicial review. So the Supreme Court reviews decisions made by the lower courts, government agencies, and public officials to ensure that they are lawful and reasonable. So as it states, if you do go to the traffic court, gun court, juvenile court, the Supreme Court does have the responsibility to review the decisions made by those courts, and if needed, they can either lower the sentence or make any necessary changes to the decision that was previously made by the courts. Issues that may arise from that court pertaining to the citizens of Jamaica. Now, some simple issues that can be arise by the Supreme Court is the cost of the court, as well as a lack of transparency and bias. Now, with the Supreme Court being the highest court out there, just as mere citizens in the community or in the country, it may be difficult for persons to get access to see a judge here so their case can be heard. So, high cost of accessing the Supreme Court can limit access to justice for marginalized communities and worsen social inequality. So, from a social standpoint, the cost can be a major issue. And when the citizens in the country can't get access to the court, they may feel that the court is not necessarily set for them, or even be able to they can be able to access it, so they know that it's not accessible for them to them, and they'll feel like this is just another way for the government to not let their voices be heard, or to assist the citizens of the country, especially those in the poorer areas of the country. Lack of transparency and bias on a social standpoint as well, it can erode trust in the Supreme Court and justice system, leading to an unrest and discontent. So, similar to the cost, a lot of persons who do see that there may not be lack of transparency during the cases, and certain judges may be taking favoritisms and so forth, they will feel that the court cannot be trusted. And with that being said, they're not going to want to go through the court system or any judicial system, and they're going to think that they may try to find ways to solve the situation on their own without bringing in that, and then that can lead to more issues again, being that person's not really fully understanding their rights or so forth, will go through something judicial on their own. On an economical standpoint, these same issues, both the cost and the lack of transparency and bias, can also have major impact on the society or peoples in the society today. On the economical standpoint, sorry, the high cost of litigations can slow the pace of justice and can lead to an economic inefficiencies, deterring investments and hindering economic growth. So, with the high cost being just to see or hear your case, or for someone to hear your case, a lot of persons will not want to go through that way, and justice is going to be slowed, being as though there are different cases that needs to be heard, but persons aren't going to go in that direction, which does lead to a lot of issues not being solved when persons do take a different route instead of going through that. And when other investors or NGOs do see, non-governmental organizations do see this being done, they may be a little bit hesitant to take part in certain investments regarding the judiciary of Jamaica's system. Additionally, the lack of transparency and bias does come in that way as well, can drop the economy for Jamaica, being that this in the Supreme Court can create a kind of uncertainty for businesses, and make it difficult for them to operate effectively and plan for the future. So when persons see that the law is not transparent with how they grow, a lot of businesses do not want to take part in certain court systems or participate in the law, as they fear that it's not going to assist them, or they're not going to be getting the assistance needed to help their business and in turn have it grow. So going to simple courts that they do need to go to can also cause an issue. So if they do need to take part in the traffic court or so forth, they're not going to want to have that done. And again, that can do lead to a drop in our
Citizens
economy
may benefit
in
from the
Jamaica.
information shared. They'll be able to at least identify the issues that arise with our judiciary system, and are aware of the specific courts that are needed for you to be able to access those courts if needed, or you have a simple claim or that you need to sort out. You know which court or how the judiciary system does work in Jamaica. And now that when you hear certain cases, or even have a family member that does need the assistance in the court system, you have a sense of knowledge as young students out there in Jamaica, and can be able to impart that knowledge in them as well, and that you know your rights and you know where to go, how to defend yourself, and how our court system plays a part in you growing as young people today. So, thank you again for participating and even watching this video. And I hope you do have a good day. You can take a look at the references that I provided. And thank you again for watching. Have yourself a wonderful day. Bye.